Hi, welcome to the video Spring Security JWT Authorization Web Token Role-based Authorization with me Nam Hà Minh from Code Java.net. In this video, you will learn how to implement role-based authorization for REST APIs with JWT Authorization Web Token in Spring Boot application. In details, I will show you how to add roles or authorities to users, how to store users authorities in a JSON Web Token, how to pass users authorities from JWT, and how to add authorization to REST APIs using the roles allowed annotation provided by Spring Security config, and how to test JWT role-based authorization using Postman program. Please note that this video is based on my previous one, the Spring Security JWT authentication video. So if you have not followed that video, I strongly recommend you to follow it first and then come back to this one. In the previous video, we developed a public API endpoint post/auth/login that allows the client to get an access token JWT in order to access the secure APIs. And we also developed a couple of secure API endpoints. The first one is get/products that allows the client to get all products information, and the second one is post/products that allows the client to add product information. And in this video, we will add authorization for the secure REST APIs, such as only clients having a role customer or editor have the right to get all products information, and only clients having the role editor have the permission to add product information. So firstly, we need to update the authentication API. For example, an API request that contains credentials of a user who has a role customer. The client sends a request that includes username and password to the API, and if the credentials are valid, it returns a response that includes the access token, which is JWT contains a claim about users' authorities, such as a role customer. And then, given an API request including a JWT that claims the user has a role customer, if the request is sent to this API, it should return a successful response because the roles allowed customer or editor. And if the request is sent to this API, it should return an error HTTP 401 or 403 because the only role allowed is editor, whereas the request contains JWT that claims the role customer only. And similarly, given an API request including a JWT that claims the user has the role editor, if the request is sent to this API, it should also return a successful response because the allowed roles customer or editor. And if the request is sent to this API, it should also return a successful response because the allowed role is editor. Okay, let me show you the project we developed in the previous video. It is a Spring Boot application that exposes some REST APIs with JWT. Let me show you the code, the authentication API. Here you see the URI endpoint is /auth/login, and this is product API. You see the URI endpoint is /products and HTTP GET and HTTP post here. So for the product API, there are two endpoints corresponding to two HTTP methods, GET and POST. And for JSON Web Token or JWT, this is a JWT token UT class, and this is a JWT token filter class. Alright, let me start this Spring Boot application to test the APIs using a Postman program. Okay, you see the application is up and running with the context path is empty here, port number 8080. Okay, let me test the authentication API first using Postman program. So I open a Postman program here and create a new collection. Spring JWT test, and create a new add a new request, add a request, and the request name is test login, and the method is post. The URL is localhost 8080 auth /login, and we need to specify email and password in the body of the request raw JSON here. And you see in the database, in the users table, we have two users here, email. And in the products table, we have 4 products here, you see. Now I use the email of this user, name at codejava.net. So I specify the body, the payload of the request here, email and value and password. Password is nam 2020 if I remember correctly, and click the send button to test the authentication API. Send. You see, it returns HTTP status 200. Okay, successful, and I get the access token in the response here. You see, and I can check the decode this JSON Web Token using the JSON debugger. So I open Chrome browser. Okay, and head over to jwt.io /dash debugger. Okay, and you can paste the JWT here to decode it. So I copy and paste here, and you see this is a payload, the decoded content of the JSON Web Token. Subject issue at expiration time. Okay, and now I'm going to test the product APIs. So I add another request here, add request, and the request name is test list products API. Okay, and the URL is localhost 8080 / products. Okay, if I click send now, I should get an error. You see, I got the status 401 unauthorized because I don't specify authorization header that should include the JSON Web Token. I got from the authentication API here. So I need to add authorization header. Click bearer token here and pass the token I got from the authentication API here. Copy and pass the token here. Paste the token here. Okay, and click send again. And you see now I got successful status and JSON response that contains the product's information. You see. And let me test the add product API. So add a new request here. Request name is test add product API. The HTTP method is post URL localhost products here, and in the authorization header we specify a bearer token here. It uses the previous one here. Let me check. Okay, correct. And we specify the payload of the request is JSON document that represents product information like this. Name is Google Pixel 6a and price is $499. Okay, click send button to test the add product API. You see I got successful created status 201 created here, and response body is a JSON document containing the product information. Now if I run the test and list products API again, I should see the newly added product here. Send. And you see the newly added product Google Pixel 6a here. Perfect, right? Now I'm going to show you how to update the project to add roles to users in order to implement JWT Role-based Authorization for our Spring Boot project. Currently we have only one user table here. As you can see in my Visual Workbench, we have only one table users. And in order to add authorization, we need to add a new table roles here that stores the information about authorities or roles of the users. And note that the entity relationship between users and roles is many to many, meaning that a user can be assigned one or more roles, and a role can be assigned to one or more users. And this is an intermediate table that realize the many-to-many entity relationship between users and roles. So for Java code, we need to create a new entity class role and update the user entity class. Make sense? Okay, come back to the project and let me stop the application. Stop. Okay, and let's create a new entity class under this package. New class. The class name is role. Okay, and we specify some JPA annotations. Entity and table, and specify the table name is rows, and we have the ID field of row, integer ID, and name. We use the ID annotation and generated value annotation strategy, is generation type identity, and for the name field we use the column annotation, and we specify the attribute nullable equal false, unique true, and the maximum length is 50 characters. Okay, and we generate methods, setters, and constructors for this role class. Generate methods and setters. Select all. Generate. Okay, and generate constructor using fields name. Generate constructor using fields ID. Alright, and an empty or no argument constructor that is required by Hibernate. Alright, so this is a role class, and then we update the user entity class to specify the many-to-many relationship with the roles. Okay, so we add a new field here, private chat of roles here, roles equal new hash chat. Alright, and we use the many-to-many annotation and specify the join table because the entity relationship is, it should be many-to-many. The entity relationship between users and roles is many-to-many, so we need to specify the intermediate table or join table, which the name is users underscore rows, and specify the join columns. Join column name is user underscore ID, and the inverse join columns is join column name is row ID. Okay, so this is require annotations to implement the many-to-many entity relationship between user and role. Okay, and then we generate getter and setter for the new field roles here. Okay, and we have got a very simple method that adds a row to the set rows row here. This rows add row. Okay, very simple, right? And next, let's create a new Java interface for role repository here. New interface role repository. It should extend the JPA repository interface. Entity type is a role, and ID type is integer. Okay, and we also should write a couple of unit tests. We code a new test class here, role repository test. We can copy some annotations from the user repository test class here. Okay, and we have a field of type role repository here, a report, and the test method test create rows. Okay. For now, just run this empty test method to let Hibernate create the rows table in the database. So right click on the method name, run as JUnit test. You see it has executed several SQL statements here to create the rows table here, the user rows table, and some constraints here. Okay, let me check in MySQL Workbench. Refresh all here, and you see there are two new tables created, rows and users underscore rows. This is the structure of the rows table. You can see here ID and name, and user rows table. You see user ID and row ID. And let me select rows from the rows table. You see the table is empty, and select rows from the user rows table. The table is empty as well. Okay, so far so good. And then let's update the test method here to proceed some rows into the rows table. The first row is admin equal new row. The row name is rows underscore admin. And the second row, third row, the second row is for editor. The row name is row underscore editor. And the third one is for customer. Row name is row underscore customer. And then we use the repo to proceed the row objects. Save all. List of admin, editor, and customer. Alright, and for assertion, we just count the number of rows. Repo count number of rows, and we use assert equals expected is 3 actual number of rows. Alright, and run this test method again. Okay, the test is successful, and you see it has executed some SQL insert statements to proceed the row objects into the rows table. Let me check in MySQL Workbench here. Select rows from the rows table. You see we have the 3 rows here: row admin, row customer, and row editor. Okay, so far so good. And next, let's write another test method for listing all rows. Okay, so I code the second unit test here. Test public void test list rows, which should be called repo file list rows, and we update the row class, override the toString method. So when an object of type row is used in the system.out.println, it will print the row name. So generate to string and select only the name. Just return the name. Okay, and update the test method. Um, assert that list rows size is greater than 0. And after assertion successful, we print each row in the list using for each with lambda expression like this. Okay, and run the test method test list rows. Alright, you see it prints 3 rows here: row admin, row customer, and row editor. And let's update the user repository test class here to test assigning rows to users. So I code the second test method in this class here. Test assign rows to user. We specify the user ID in this user ID. Let me see in MySQL Workbench. We have 2 users, ID1 and ID2. Okay, ID1 and row ID. I want to assign row. I want to assign the row editor for the user ID1. The row editor has ID2 here. ID2. Okay, and we get the user object using repo file by ID. User ID get user, and then we call user add row here. We just create a new row object and passing the row ID. Very simple. Okay, and then we save the user repo, save user, updated user. And for assertion, we assert that updated user get rows has size is 1 because we assign only one row to this user. Okay, and run this test method. Successful, and you see it executed some SQL statements to select user, select rows, and insert into user rows table here. Let me check in the database. Refresh rows table, refresh users table, and refresh users rows table, and you see this is the association between the user ID1 and the row ID2. Okay, and let me update the test to assign the rows customer and editor for the user ID2. User ID2 and user ID2, and the row ID is 2 and 3. 2 and 3 for the rows customer and editor. ID 2 and 3. Okay, and run the test method again. Okay, user ID 2. Sorry, I need to update the assertion here as size 2. Okay, that means the test was successful. Let me check users roles. And you see, we got 2 new roles for user ID 2 here aside with row ID 2 and 3. Next, let's update the code so that upon successful authorization, the authentication API returns a response that includes the access token, which is JWT contains a claim about users' authorities, such as a role customer. Okay, so we update the authentication API, the login method here, and you see upon successful authentication, it generates an access token here. So we update this method in the JWT token UT class. We add a new claim to the token like this claim, which the name is, for example, rows. You can use any claim name. This here private claim name, and the value is the user rows get rows to string. Okay, and run the application and test the authentication API, and we decode the generated JWT to see the content of the claim rows here. Okay, now use Postman to test login here with user name at code java.net. It should return the JW token that claims the user has the role editor. So I click the send button again here, send, and we got a new access token. I copy and paste into the JWT debugger here to decode. And you see now in the decoded payload here, you see the claim rows with the value row editor here. Okay, so far so good. Let me test login as another user. Now let me update this add request rename test login as editor user, and let me add another request post localhost, change the name to test login as customer and editor user, and specify the payload, which is JSON document here. Email is the email of the second user in the database here. User john@gmail.com, and password, if I remember correctly, it is John 2020. Okay, click send. The password is incorrect because I got the status for 1. Let me change the password. John 2021. Still not correct. John 2022. Still not correct. I think the password is John 123. 123. Click send. Okay, successful, and I got a new access token for the user john@gmail.com. I copy the JWT here and paste here to decode it. Okay, and you see now in the decoded payload we have the roles of the user, role customer and role editor. Perfect, right? And next, we need to update the JWT token filter to read to pass the users roles, users authorities from the access token sent from the client. Okay, come back to the project and open the JWT token filter class, and we update the code here. The method get user details here that pass the JWT token to get the subject, user ID, user email. Firstly, we should make this method pass claims public. Okay, and here we update the code. Here we get JWT UT pass claims access token. It returns a claims object. Okay, and we get the subject string, subject equal claims get claims subject, cast the return value to a string. We replace subject here, subject. All right, and now we get the claim name rows, which we set here. Claim rows here. Claims get rows. We cast to a string. Claim rows like this. And you see, because it is encoded like this, you see with the opening this character here and adding with this character brackets here. So we need to remove the opening and closing brackets. Now like this, claim rows equal claim rows replace, sorry, just replace the opening bracket here by an empty string, square bracket, and replace the closing square bracket here by an empty string. Okay, so we remove the opening and closing square brackets, and then we split the string with the delimiter is the comma to get individual row name. Okay, so next we should claim rows split delimiter is the comma and assign the return value to an array of string row names, and then we use for each loop to iterate to each row name in the row names here, and then we call user details add row new row. with the name is role name. Okay, so this code reconstructs the user's authorities or user roles, and then we update the method get set authentication context in the constructor of the class username password authentication token. We pass the user authorities here, user details, get authorities. So we need to update the user class here. Implement the code in the method get authorities here. Previously we return now. Now we create a list of simple granted authority equal new array list, and we for each row in the set rows here authorities add new simple granted authority with the row name get name, very simple, right? And then we return the list authorities. Okay, that's the update, the code we need to update in order to pass the JWT sense from the client to get the user authorities, user roles. All right, save all the changes, and we are ready to test the authentication API to check. One more thing, I should print the claim rows here for testing. Okay, and now let's test the authentication API. Login as editor user here. Okay, click send. Successful. And let me check in the sorry, we need also test the API list products here. Okay, now I copy the JWT, the access token here. Copy and edit this request. Paste the token here. Okay, and click send. Okay, successful. And now in the console view here, you see it prints claim rows, row editor of the user name at code java.net. Okay, perfect. Now let me test with another token from the user who has a role customer and editor here. I can copy this access token. Copy. Okay, and paste here. Okay, click send. Successful. And you see now it prints two rows, row customer and row editor, which of the user zone in the database. Yeah, the user zone with ID 2 is assigned two rows ID 2 and 3, which row customer and row editor. Make sense? And finally, let's update the project code to implement JWT role-based authorization. So the roles allowed for the API get slash products are customer or editor, and the roles allowed for the add product API is only editor. Okay, come back to the project, and we need to modify the Maven dependency in the pom.xml file to include the Spring Security config dependency. Spring Security config, sorry, here. We just change artifact ID to Spring Bootstrap Security and config. Sorry, it should be Spring Security config. Okay, save the change. Something wrong here. I think it should be Spring Boot Starter Security config. Still wrong. Sorry. The group ID should be org.springframework.security, and the artifact ID is Spring Security config. Okay, so this is a dependency we need in order to apply global method security for the project. Okay, and then we update the application security configuration class here to use the enable global method security here, and we specify the arguments pre-ports enable equal false, secure enable equal false, and we just enable JSR 250 in order to use the roles allowed annotation in our code. Okay, and then we update the product API here. For the list products API, we specify the annotation roles allowed here, with the role name is for listing the role name for listing the roles customer and editor. So we specify role underscore customer and role underscore editor here. And for the add product API, we specify only role is editor. Roles allowed is role underscore editor. Okay, save all the changes, and we are ready to test JWT authorization with the product API. Okay, let me test listing products API using the user with the role editor and custom test list product API test login as editor user. Let me copy this access token. Copy and decode it to see the roles. You see role editor here. Okay, and modify the request here. Paste the token here. Click send. Successful. I still got the successful response that includes the JSON document of a list of products here. Okay, Okay, now let me check this access token from the user with the role customer and editor. Copy, paste here to decode. You see the roles are role customer and role editor. And now I paste into the test list products API here. Click send, and I should also get the successful response. Okay, you see. Okay, and now for the add product API, you know the add product API requires the user who claims has the role editor only. So if copy I copy the access token from the editor user. Sorry, copy the access token editor customer. Okay, copy the access token from the editor user here and paste into the. If I click send now, I should got an error. You see, I got the error for one unauthorized. So I need to update the access token here. Okay, click modify the payload for another product. For example, Dell Inspiron 3000 price. Okay, click send. You see successful. That means the API request has been authorized. Okay, so far so good. Now let me add another user using JWT test, user repository test, create user here. The password is Mark 2020. User email Mark. Okay, and run this test method to create another user. Run as JWT test. Okay, successful. Let me check my SQL Workbench. We have a new user Mark at gmail.com. And now I run the assign roles to user ID 3. And for this user, I want to assign the role customer only with the ID 3 here. ID 3. Okay, and run this test method to assign the role customer to the user Mark. Okay, successful. Check user roles table. You see, we got a new association here. Okay, and then let me test login. Add another request. Test login as customer user. Post here and URL localhost and specify the body JSON here. Email is mark@gmail.com and password is Mark 2020. Okay, click send. Successful, and I got the access token here. Copy and get it decoded using the JWT debugger here. You see user Mark and the role is role customer here. Okay, so then I use this access token to test the add product API. Modify the authorization header here. Paste the token, and because user customer does not have permission to add product, so I should got an error. Click send. You see I got the error 403 forbidden. access denied exception here. That means the user with the role the customer does not have permission has not been authorized to access the API at product information here, which requires only role editor. Alright, so far you have learned how to implement a JWT role-based authorization in a Spring Boot project using Spring Security. I hope you found this video tutorial helpful. Please subscribe to my channel, like, comment, and share this video. Thanks for watching.